platforms nowadays, such as Google and Facebook, have amassed a huge power, not only in their ability to curate speech and sociality and govern our social interactions, but also in their ability to really control digital markets and digital innovation. And even more crucially, we can see that this is really centered on few companies and individuals. We have Mark Zuckerberg and Meta, and even now Elon Musk's appeal to buy Twitter. And moreover now, if we really think about platforms as global private policy hubs, which are really creating the governance in order to govern how we interact, then it becomes even more important that this has a certain level of democratic accountability and that we bring this more in line with our democratic values. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that platforms are all powerful. They're already limited by laws, market dynamics, the infrastructure over the internet. But now we can also see that governments are really starting to look into regulating digital platforms. Most notably in the EU, we have the DSA and the DMA in the Digital Services Package. And we can see that also in the US, they're starting to listen into this and move a bit further away from their digital liberalism. And we really want to use this new push and yet really re-gearing it towards a global platform governance, because it's really there that we can tap into the power of platforms that they have over our online lives.
Platforms issue policies that govern a large part of the social space they create, but they are also being governed by norms, rules, and processes, and that is what we call platform governance. Different scholars have taken different approaches to analyze and assess platform governance, for example, based on platforms' respect for procedural and fundamental values, or by assessing the democratic legitimacy of different modes of governance involving platform self-regulation, government intervention, and civil society initiatives. So we built on these approaches, but add an essential analytical distinction between two main levels of platform governance, one that is internal and one that is external to the platform itself. And this really allows us to better understand the complementarity of these different levels of governance and to analyze the way in which platforms can be held accountable from the outside by government institutions and civil society organizations, and from the inside by oversight and ethical boards or by users themselves.
Firstly, most crucially would be a separation of power. And now platforms as private and global policy hubs aren't subject to any global governance framework, nor are they subject to public accountability. So essentially they can have the possibility to outdo democratic governments, which is a huge risk. Currently, any approach to separation of power is mainly premised on content moderation. And we see this in the Facebook Oversight Board, or even in social society initiatives, such as the Social Media Council. And even if we go further into the DSA, where they mainly bring in users, is in a system of appeals to content moderation decisions. So ultimately, the sharing of power is still quite limited and doesn't get to the core of global platform governance. Now, democratic legitimacy is another part of the checks and balances, which has the potential to hold platforms accountable by including users in decision-making and allowing them really to influence platform policy. However, all of this would be useless unless it is effective and efficient, which is our third criteria for a good system of checks and balances. Indeed, platform opacity is one of the key ways in which platforms really retain their power within their own walls, and thus effective transparency requirements are really the key to good platform governance. So what really needs to be done is ensure that there's an adequate system of co-governance between platforms, between governments, and between civil society initiatives to really make sure that platforms serve us.
So now the EU is pursuing its efforts to create a legal framework for platform governance. However, this doesn't really get to the core of platform governance, nor to the core of platform power, as it doesn't really tackle policy and design more broadly, which is really what shapes and frames online sociality. Nor does it really tackle the global nature of platforms, which is what allows them to elude government intervention. And nor does it really get to the private nature of platforms, which results in a lack of internal democratic accountability. So we make several recommendations that tap into each of these issues. First, we propose to create, on top of a right to appeal content moderation decisions, a right to appeal platform design and policy decisions. This would be partially mediated by a European Open Council on Platform Governance that would inform citizens and open a space for debate. Secondly, we propose the EU to push for a global platform governance body that would set global principles of platform governance, assess their implementation, and then also promote cooperation between platform government and civil society redress mechanisms to facilitate the exercise of user rights. And thirdly, we propose to further empower and include users in platform decision making. For this, we think that the EU should issue a code of conduct on crowdsourced governance, setting guidelines, user fact-checking and voting initiatives, and further incentivizing platforms to shift toward more democratic internal governance.